Professor Zhang breaks down why the Iran-US conflict is far more significant than the media is letting on, and how Israel manipulated the US into fighting a war that isn't ours, while American lives are put on the line.
As I mentioned last class, there are three major questions that will determine how this war is fought, what this war will end up looking like, and how the world will change. And as I discussed last class, I'm making three predictions about this war. The first is the United States will use ground troops. And this will mean that Donald Trump will institute a national draft. Okay? That's the first prediction. Second prediction is that Israel and the United States will not use tactical nuclear weapons in this war. Number three is that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in the Islamic world, will be destroyed during this war. Okay, so last class I explained my analysis and my reasoning for my first two predictions. Today I'll explain my third prediction. But before we start, I just want to look at some videos, okay? So you understand some of the context, some of the players in this war. All right, so this is Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, and he is one of the 100 members of the US Senate. He's also one of the members of the Gang of Eight. Now, when you are fighting a war, the White House has responsibility to report its objectives, its purpose, how the war is progressing to 8 members of Congress in a confidential setting, okay? And this is Senator Blumenthal after he's been debriefed by the White House. Okay, and this is what he has to say about the progress of the war so far.
I emerged from this briefing as dissatisfied and angry, frankly, as I have from any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate. I am left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war. My questions have been unanswered, and I will demand answers because the American people deserve to know. And I guess I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here. And there is also, as disturbingly as anything else, the specter of active Russian aid to Iran, putting in danger American lives.
All right, so three things to take away from his talk with reporters, okay? The first thing is the administration, Donald Trump, the White House, has not articulated a budget. How much will this war cost? Which means that this is an open-ended war. We don't know when this war will end, and so we don't know what the commitment is, and so we don't know how much this war will cost, okay? That's the first point he makes. The second point he makes is we are on a path towards the deployment of ground troops in Iran, okay? And that basically means a national draft. And the third thing that's crucial is he says that they know for a fact that Russia is already involved in this war, aiding Iran. Okay, so that's the three main takeaways from okay, so this is the Foreign Minister of Iran, Araghchi, talking to NBC News. All right, and NBC News is going to ask Araghchi, hey, there's talk in the United States already of ground troops being used against Iran. Okay? Now I want you to observe his response and then the response of the journalist.
President Trump has not ruled out boots on the ground in Iran. Are you afraid of a U.S. invasion in your country?
No, we are waiting for them.
You were waiting for the U.S. military to invade the ground troops?
Yes, because we are confident that we can confront them, and that would be a big disaster for them.
Okay, you understand? Okay.
So you're saying that Iran is ready and willing to take on the U.S. military if there were to be ground troops?
Well, we were ready for this.
Okay, so again, certain things to appreciate. First of all, the Foreign Minister Araghchi, he is not at all concerned about ground troops. In fact, he basically said, it's a trap for you guys. You come in, we've been preparing for about 20 years for this, we will destroy you. Another thing that you will notice is the journalist is completely surprised by the answer. He's shocked into silence. He has to ask again, wait, are you saying you're ready for ground troops? And so this shows you that within Washington, D.C., okay, within the Trump administration, within the foreign policy elite, within the media elite, they haven't really thought this through out. They really haven't considered the possibility of losing this war. Washington, D.C. right now, it's a bubble, okay? It's an insular bubble where everyone just believes the same things. And that's very problematic if you are to continue fighting this war, okay? All right, let's continue. Okay, this is Rabbi Schneerson. And he is the leader, or he used to be, he's died, but he used to be the leader of an organization called the Shabbat Lubavitch. I'll be talking more about Shabbat Lubavitch as we go along, okay? But I introduce you to him now. This is year 1990, and he is talking to Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a young and upcoming politician in Israel, okay? And so let's look at the conversation. This is Netanyahu,
מה שישראל לאחרונה ניתצו כמה עניינים. מה שרואה עוד, וגם משהו שעדיין משאיר ליבו. אז הייתה משהו במה ידיעתו. עושים. הכנראה שהיא מספיק, שהיום כבר כמה שעות מגיעים עדיין ליבו. אבל יש עוד כמה שעות, אבל יש להשתדל גם היום. בצורה טובה.
Okay, so what's going on here? Okay, so as an up-and-coming politician, Netanyahu is going to the rabbi, and the rabbis are the most powerful people in the Jewish society. He basically says, will you give me your blessing? Will you support me in my political endeavors? And the rabbi says, yes. They also talk about how things are progressing, okay? So another way of saying this is that there's almost like a plan in motion to achieve certain religious objectives. And things are going well. But the Rabbi Schneerson says, but they're not going fast enough because we need the Messiah, the great leader of the Jewish people, to come. And we can set in motion things that will force the coming of the Messiah. So let's speed things up, Netanyahu. Okay? So what this is, I'll explain later on, okay? But I want you to be aware of this, who these people are. Rabbi Senator is very important for our story. And Netanyahu, of course, is the current Prime Minister of Israel. All right, let's continue. All right.
We want to know what you're reading now.
What I'm reading?
Yeah.
It's called The Jews Against Rome.
What made you pick it up?
Well, we lost that one. I think we have to win the next one.
We want to know what you're reading now.
Okay. All right, so that's a very quick exchange, okay? So a journalist is asking Benjamin Netanyahu, what book are you reading now? And he says, Rome versus the Jews. It's a book by Barry Strauss, a historian. And it goes on about the 3 wars that the Jews fought against the Romans. And it was essentially a Holocaust for the Jews. A lot of Jews either died or were enslaved. The Romans burned down the Second Temple. So there's this historical animosity of the Jews against the Romans. Okay? But what he said is, what Benjamin Netanyahu said is that I'm reading this book because we lost that war against Rome. But in the next war against Rome, we must not lose. The question then is, who's Rome? It's not Iran, guys. It's probably not Russia. It's probably America, right? The great empire. So this is strange because Israel is the ally of America in this war. But Netanyahu is saying that, no, our real enemy is Rome. And that's what we must prepare for, okay? So I want you guys to keep this in mind. All right, this is Peter Hegseth, who is the Secretary of War for Donald Trump, okay? And this is the year about 2018, where he is in Jerusalem, and he's talking to Christian Zionists, okay? Who these people are, I'll explain later on, okay? But let's listen to his speech really quickly.
And I and others had a chance to go see the Western Wall of the Temple Mount, the Western Wall tunnels, so much of the old city. And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle, 1948 was a miracle, 1967 was a miracle, 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle, and there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible.
Okay, so he is a Christian. He's not a Jew. But what he's saying is that he's come to Jerusalem and he's visited these Jewish holy sites. And he can't help be amazed, be awed by the beauty, the spirituality of the Western Wall. He also goes on to say that there's been a series of miracles, okay? So 1917 was the Balfour Declaration, when basically the British Empire permitted the Jews to found the nation-state of Israel. 1948 was when Israel was founded. 1967 was when when Israel fought a war against its Arab neighbors and won. Okay, and 2017 was when Donald Trump transferred the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, thus recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And what he's saying is that, well, if this is a series of steps to achieving a divine plan, then the next miracle should be the rebuilding of Solomon's temple, the third temple, and that means destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay? So what's going on here? Okay, again, I'll explain to you later on, but I want you to be aware of who these people are and how they think. All right, let's go one more video. And so if you want to build Solomon's temple, if you want to build the third temple, you need to get rid of the third holiest site in the Islamic world. And how do you do that? Well, there are some options, okay? So
missiles will hit the mosque and clear the place for the third Bet HaMikdash. That could also be a miracle. If it was up to me, the last time when they shot hundreds of missiles, I would pretend that one missile came from Iran and shoot it down. You know, then all the Arabs will go against Iran, it will be the end of the problems. You make them fight with each other, this bunch of lunatics. Never too late. You deal with a bunch of cowards.
Okay, so this is a rabbi in Israel. He's saying how last year, during the 12-day war in June, Iran was firing missiles at Israel. And what he's saying is, that was an opportunity for us to pretend that Iranian missile hit the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, thus destroying it. And then the Arabs will blame the Iranians, and the Arabs will go to war against the Persians. And then we can just sit back and laugh at these lunatics. Okay? So, again, this may be confusing to you as to who these people are, why they are saying these things. All right? But now what I'm going to do is explain to you what is really going on. Okay? And I keep on saying this, but it is hard from a geopolitical perspective to explain this US-Iran war. You have to look at the religious perspective, okay? The religious angle, and that's what I want to focus on today.
You cannot understand this conflict purely through a secular geopolitical lens, in that religious eschatology must be factored in, is not fringe. In fact, the opposite approach, treating religion as epiphenomenal or purely instrumental in Middle Eastern politics, is now widely recognized as a significant analytical failure among political scientists and historians. Bernard Lewis, one of the most influential Western scholars of the Middle East, regardless of how one evaluates his policy prescriptions, spent decades arguing that Western analysts fundamentally misread the region by filtering it through secular Enlightenment assumptions that simply don't apply. Karen Armstrong, approaching the subject from a very different ideological direction, has similarly argued that the resurgence of religious nationalism globally is not a throwback to pre-modern irrationality, but a genuine political force that demands serious intellectual engagement. John Gray's work on secular political ideologies as disguised eschatologies adds another layer of theoretical sophistication to this conversation. Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations, whatever its flaws, at least forced Western policy elites to confront the idea that civilizational and religious identity might be more durable as a driver of conflict than liberal internationalists assumed. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict in particular is one of the most religiously saturated political conflicts on Earth. The Temple Mount, where Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock stand, is simultaneously one of the holiest sites in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Its status is not merely a real estate dispute or a sovereignty question. It is a site around which multiple religious communities have organized their deepest theological narratives about human destiny, divine promise, and the end of history. Any analysis of this conflict that waves that away as a relevant superstition is analytically impoverished. So the speaker's instinct to center religion is a legitimate one. Christian Zionism in particular is a real, powerful, and significantly underreported force in American domestic politics. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented sociological and political phenomenon. Christian Zionists, who believe that the return of Jewish people to the land of Israel is a prerequisite for the second coming of Christ in the end times, constitute a substantial portion of the Republican Party's evangelical base. Organizations like Christians United for Israel, founded by John Hagee, have enormous fundraising capacity and direct political access. Their theological commitments genuinely shape how many Republican politicians, not all, but many, think about Israel, Jerusalem, and the broader Middle East. Ignoring this is not neutrality. It's a blind spot. The clip the speaker references of Senator Richard Blumenthal emerging from a Gang of Eight briefing, visibly angry and dissatisfied, reflects genuine, documented tension between the executive branch and Congress over war powers and transparency. The Gang of Eight, the top 4 congressional leaders and the top 4 Intelligence Committee members, is the mechanism by which the executive branch is supposed to keep Congress minimally informed about intelligence operations and military actions. When a senior senator with 15 years of experience says he has never been more dissatisfied by a briefing, That is a significant data point. The three concerns Blumenthal articulates: no articulated budget for the war, a trajectory toward ground troop deployment in Iran, and confirmed Russian involvement aiding Iran, are each individually serious policy concerns, and their combination is genuinely alarming from a strategic planning perspective. An open-ended war without a budget or clearly defined objectives is exactly how the United States got into the longest wars of its history in Afghanistan and Iraq. Blumenthal's frustration is not partisan theater. It reflects real institutional dysfunction in how this conflict is being managed and communicated. The speaker's summary of his 3 points is accurate and fair. One of the most genuinely interesting moments the speaker highlights is Araghchi's response when asked whether Iran is afraid of a potential American ground invasion. His answer, essentially, "No, we've been preparing for this for 20 years and we're waiting for you," is striking for several reasons, and the speaker is right to flag it. Iran has spent decades developing an asymmetric warfare doctrine specifically designed to make a conventional American military victory strategically hollow, even if it were tactically achievable. This includes extensive proxy networks across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Gaza, hardened underground military infrastructure, a developed ballistic missile program, the capacity to threaten Gulf oil infrastructure, and a population that, regardless of its feelings about the Islamic Republic's governance, has a deep historical memory of foreign invasion and tends to rally around national resistance when threatened. Military analysts, including those at the Rand Corporation and various war colleges, have gamed out US-Iran ground conflict scenarios and consistently found that the costs and complexity are vastly underestimated in public discourse. The journalist's visible shock at Araghchi's confidence is itself analytically revealing. If a seasoned NBC journalist covering foreign policy is stunned by the idea that Iran might actually be prepared for a ground invasion and might not be afraid of one, that suggests a significant gap between the assumptions embedded in mainstream American media coverage and the actual strategic reality. The speaker's point about the insular bubble of Washington foreign policy groupthink is one that has been made by realist scholars like John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt for years, from a rigorous academic framework. It is not a fringe observation. Now, we need to be equally thorough and honest about where the speaker's argument breaks down, oversimplifies, or crosses from analysis into advocacy. The problems here are serious and systematic. The most persistent and damaging analytical error running through this entire lecture is the conflation of marginal or fringe religious voices with the official policy positions of states, governments, and military establishments. The speaker does this repeatedly and without apparent awareness that they are doing it, which makes it all the more problematic. The clip of the rabbi suggesting that Israel could have pretended an Iranian missile destroyed the Dome of the Rock is presented as if it reveals a hidden truth about Israeli strategic intentions. But who is this rabbi? What is his political authority? Is he a member of the Israeli Knesset? Does he hold any official religious or governmental position? Is this a mainstream view within Israeli religious or political society, or is it a provocative comment made by one person in what appears to be an informal panel discussion? The transcript does not tell us, and the speaker does not ask these questions. Instead, the clip is allowed to do rhetorical work far beyond what it can actually support. This is not a trivial methodological point. If someone wanted to build a case that the United States was planning genocide, they could find clips of American politicians, commentators, and religious figures saying genuinely horrifying things and present them as revealing hidden truths about American policy. The United States is a country of 330 million people, with a free press, open social media, and thousands of public figures saying all kinds of things at all times. You can cherry-pick clips to support almost any narrative. The existence of a clip does not constitute evidence of a policy agenda. The relationship between what someone says in a speech or panel discussion and what a government actually plans and executes is not a direct one, and treating it as such is a serious analytical failure. The same problem applies to Hegseth's speech. Peter Hegseth visiting Jerusalem and expressing personal religious emotion about the possibility of a third temple is being presented as evidence that the American government has a secret or semi-secret agenda to destroy Al-Aqsa. But personal religious sentiment and official government policy are categorically different things. American politicians routinely say things in religious settings that reflect their personal faith and would be politically and legally impossible to actually implement as policy. This is especially true in a country with First Amendment protections and the political complexity of managing relationships with dozens of Muslim-majority countries, all of which would react with fury and potentially violence to any American endorsement of destroying the third holiest site in Islam.